Again, thanks to Jim for the invite, for the opportunity to come in and speak to you about a bit about my own business and a bit about the wholesale trade in the UK. We trade under 5 brands. I think it's up there. I'll just give you a bit of background about Leeds, where we're based to start with. So it's a major finance and business services city in the north of England, second only to London. There are about 2 million people live within a 30-minute drive of Leeds, and there are 5 million people live in Yorkshire, which is generally the region we operate in and serve. So we've got GT Produce, which is a very traditional fresh produce wholesaler, similar to the Hunts Point market, which I'm looking forward to visiting on Thursday morning. Approximately 50% of what we do goes into food service, catering companies, independents, with the remaining half going into independent retail, farm shops, and people who operate markets throughout the summer. We also supply about 200 plus schools for the local education authority, where we're delivering the fruit and veg that's used in the school dinners. GT Flowers, it's a one-stop shop for florists. We sell everything they might require: flowers, plants, florist sundries, and this particular part of the business is one we've invested a lot in IT over the last year. From 6 months ago, we had no internet sales. It's 20% of our sales now are done online. Not all new sales. A lot of that's people who would previously have ordered through different avenues by email or fax, but we're pushing the online system. It's much more efficient. It gives them a better service. And we're expecting that to increase significantly because we've just put a new system in whereby we'll start offering the plants online. The florist sundries will all be available online. And we'll have an app, which my dad still can't believe that as a wholesaler we're going to have an app. He's been asking one for a year and we've got him one. Another thing the technology brings us is our customers can now buy direct from Holland, either online or through an app again. And what they're actually seeing is our supplier stock, and not just our supplier stock, the full range of products available in Holland. So they can buy on that. They receive their invoice, the produce is delivered to us within about 24 hours, and then they can come and collect it or have it delivered, which is a marvellous service for the customers for just the sheer range of products they have available to them. Unfortunately, we're not immune. We had tried to build GT Flowers as a cash and carry. We wanted customers to come down and visit. The idea behind that being, if they've come in, we can sell them what we want to sell them. We can get them to buy extra products. But everyone's moving to buying online and wanting a delivery, and the customers don't want to get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, come down, spend an hour in the warehouse, and then drive home themselves. So again, an increase in costs for us, significant investment in vehicles and drivers. GD Sundries, that was, I'll just say sideline, because it's the only non-perishable products we sell. We realise there's no reason we can't sell that throughout the country. It's very easy. Put in a box and post it. There's no cost to us. We've got the stock there already. So that was put on an e-commerce platform called Magento, owned by eBay. And again, the logic behind that, as soon as we've got that running smoothly, it's very easy to integrate that with Amazon and eBay. Again, just expanding the amount of customers you can serve. GT Prep, similar to what some of the other delegates have been saying here today, we realised a number of our customers had a requirement for prepared produce, and it is a growing sector. We didn't want our customers starting to approach other suppliers, so in 2010 we started our own prep business, and that's was growing gradually. It's starting to take off now. We're mainly doing it not to the retail sector, that's for the cost sector catering, it's schools, hospitals, old people's homes, etc. Where those businesses, they don't want the waste, they don't want to be employing someone to stand there peeling potatoes, dealing with the waste, etc. A big problem for us is that it's very capital intensive, so as soon as we get 10% more sales, the managers come up saying, I need two new machines. And the machines are all horrendously expensive. And then at the bottom, Sharrock's Fresh Produce. It's a business we purchased in July. It complemented our existing GT Produce business extremely well. It was a fourth generation family wholesaler again. Very similar product range, very similar customer base, just in a different geographic area. And we'd been looking for quite a long time how we were going to take GT Produce to the next level. We didn't believe we could get many more sales in Leeds. We served most of the main customers around that area. So we were only looking at incremental increases there. So when that opportunity came up, we were delighted. And buying Sharrock's, which was turning over at $15 million, means we've now got a combined produce spend of about $30 million, which strategically for us, we believe for the next 5 or 10 years will put us in a much stronger position as we now move to trying to move to more efficient purchasing, containers, bulk purchases. So a brief history of Gilbert Thompson's. It started in 1909, which Gilbert, my great-grandfather, started with a horse and cart. He'd actually started at 13 as an errand boy delivering fruit and vegetables, but he got the sack after 4 years for taking an extra half day's unpaid holiday. And at the time, holiday was 1 week's unpaid. We actually know quite a bit about Gilbert because in 1962, when he was 70, he wrote a 13-page book, A Brief Glimpse into My Life, which in the preface says, I know no one will be interested in this, but someone might want to read it at some point. So after the interruption of the First World War, he finally managed to start his own wholesale premises in 1932, which there'll be a picture coming up, where he operated until Clifford, my grandfather, joined it. And in 1967, it moved to a new purpose-built site just on the outskirts of Leeds. And a reflection at the time, there were 40 independent wholesalers moved to that site. And this was at the time when local authorities had an obligation to provide a wholesale market, which is why there's so many wholesale markets up and down the country. That requirement was removed just before the millennium, and subsequently a number of authorities decided that they wanted the relatively large piece of prime land next to the city centres back. Especially the wholesale markets had declined in a number of areas and were only half utilised. Okay, and then in 1999, that's one of the reasons we had to move out, so we bought our own premises, and at that time the remaining wholesalers in the market moved with us, becoming tenants, but there were only 4 businesses moved at that point. Having said that, I think, as I said in the video earlier, a lot larger, better capitalised companies. Again, in 2010, we started GT Prep. Sorry, I just missed the quote there that Gilbert said when he was about the wholesale trade. Yes, market life is hard, harassing, and in winter, the coldest place I know, which for anyone who's experienced wholesale will understand. And I'll be interested to see how cold Hunts Point is on Thursday. So in 2011, we expanded the GT Flowers branch of the business. Again, we reached saturation point in Leeds. We were quite dominant in that market, serving nearly everybody. The only way to increase sales was to open elsewhere, so we opened in Sheffield. 2012, we won the Wholesaler of the Year award from the Fresh Produce Consortium. And jumping around. 2015, we purchased Sharrock's, doubling the produce turnover. And again, with significant investment in IT throughout the business, we've put in 2 new computer systems, a new cold store just due for completion, hopefully in time for Christmas. Otherwise, we'll be struggling. And then the plans for next year, opening a GT Flowers branch at Sharrock's, where they don't currently sell flowers, making more products available online through the flowers site, putting the plants and sundries on, and also trying to get produce customers to start ordering through the website, and a move to 24-hour trading. We're still very traditional wholesale hours at the moment, and again, it's just offering a better level of service to customers, more access to produce at a time that's convenient for them. And again, I think it's relevant to the wholesale trade, but probably all fresh produce trade. Another quote from Gilbert is, so different to other trades, there are no fixed prices in this business. because the produce you handle is perishable, and secondly, because the buyers are the people who fix or make the price. That's a photograph of Gilbert in 1932 at his first premises. And just a little bit about myself. Obviously, like most people in the wholesale trade, I started very young, going down to work in the holidays, helping out. I'm not sure that's strictly legal, working at 10 years old, but and then I went to university and studied business studies before entering the software industry for a couple of years. But I soon realised that sitting in front of a screen for 40 hours a week, not speaking to anyone, didn't really suit me. So I joined the company in 1999, and becoming the fourth generation, my brother was already there. We did a management buyout in 2010 when my father retired, and in 2008 I became a director of the Fresh Produce Consortium, which is the UK's trade association, mainly to represent the wholesale sector. So prevailing trends from a wholesale perspective in the UK. Again, a couple of people have mentioned this already, but increased and more diverse food service, particularly around Leeds. Restaurants are opening every week. You can see the move. There's now Turkish, Iraqi restaurants opening. It seems that everywhere has to have a cafe, parks, shopping, leisure centres. Everywhere you go, there's an availability of food and somewhere to sit and eat. Again, highlighted by Leeds has just built a $500 million shopping complex called the Trinity. And the focal point of that is the Trinity Kitchen, where they've dedicated a large area to largely independents. They have pop-up restaurants, all sorts of different food service available in there, not just your normal brands you'd expect. And that's an extremely popular place. And again, why is there an increased and more diverse, an increase in food service when obviously we've had one of the worst recessions in the last 100 years? Largely, I put down to, particularly Leeds, it's affluent anyway, but a lot of people didn't want to buy the big ticket items. They didn't want to buy new cars or pay for expensive holidays or renovate the house. But at the same time, because of the record low interest rates, an awful lot of people were several £100s a month better off. I think you can't cut back on everything. So whilst we were in a recession, eating out just continued to increase. Again, for the wholesale trade, a growing and changing product range. Again, we've seen the decline in traditional products like iceberg lettuce or whole round tomatoes, which is just reflected the other changes that people have discussed previously. A move to convenience foods, ready bagged salads, punnets of cherry tomatoes, things that make it quick and easy to buy and eat. And a big change, I think I discussed the herbs. We've gone from just selling your bog standard herbs. The range is getting ever bigger. Then we've moved on to micro herbs. And again, looking around markets around the country, the London markets and Birmingham market, I can still walk in there and not recognise some of the products I have on for sale. It's changing so quickly. One of the big changes for us as a wholesale trade around the country was the reduced market share of value products. This is something we traditionally received the bulk of. So with the supermarket standards, they obviously used to reject apples too small, pears too small, single bananas. So the wholesale markets had that sector to themselves effectively, and we're serving a range of customers with that. With the recession and the requirements for supermarkets to be able to offer a value brand or an economy brand, they started to hoover up all that sector of produce, offering small apples, bagged apples, loose bananas in bags, and that obviously took that availability away for the wholesale sector. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change. Those economy ranges are there to stay now, which has hit a number of our retailers hard because that's something they used to be able to compete with the supermarkets on. And with a drive to the bottom now in terms of pricing, the independent retailers are finding it particularly hard. But on a positive note, farm shops are vastly on the increase in the UK. It's been a real retail phenomenon. It's aligned to the requirement for provenance, which I think Jim's covered in the past at one point about what does provenance mean to people. Is it food from 20 miles away or 50 miles away? Or is it just the same state? Or is it just the same country? or in some cases you just want to know where that food's been grown, that it's by a genuine farmer, and it's been grown with environmentally friendly methods. But that's something the farm shops have really tapped into. It's offered consumers an alternative to the big supermarkets. They tend to, I don't know if you've got a similar phenomenon in the US, but they tend to be slightly rural. They'll often have playgrounds for the kids or petting animals. They'll have the cafe. And it just seems to appeal to the consumer at the moment not to be going to the big brand names that they've had to deal with in the past. We've particularly got a customer who's just spent $3 million, I believe, on a new farm shop. And they were hoping it was going to do at least half of what their existing farm shop did. Within 2 weeks, it was doing 50% more. And I turned up with my wife and kids to try and have a look around, and you literally could not get through the door. The car park was full, there were cars lining the roads, and I just said we'll have to come back another time. But that's the farm shops tend to be selling a premium product. It's not cheap. They often have a range of other dry products and things that aren't the same brands as you've got in the supermarket. So they are trying to differentiate themselves, and it seems to be working. Funnily enough, the farm shops do source most of the stuff through the wholesale markets, but it's something the consumers don't really seem to have appreciated. We were out for dinner with my friends and his wife, and she quite proudly told me how she bought all her fresh produce from a local farm shop. And I went, no, we supply those. And she looked at me a bit, she said, what do you mean you supply them? It's a farm shop. I said, yeah, but it's a dairy farm. They grow milk. It's, they haven't got a field of bananas, a field of parsnips, a field of peaches, a field of oranges. So it's surprising how the consumer was so taken with the concept, when in actual fact a lot of the produce is just the same as you could get in the supermarket, to be honest. And then the other factor is increased demand for certification. As wholesalers, we're facing more and more demands for what accreditation have you got. Have you got BRC standards? Have you got SALSA standards? People are asking for your full product specifications. People are asking for your product recall procedures. And unfortunately, that's an area where a lot of traditional wholesalers have struggled to contend with. Quite often people have come into the wholesale sector, they haven't got outside business experience, they don't have the IT knowledge to be able to facilitate that. And it means that they're cut off from a whole segment of trade that they could otherwise deal with, such as some of the food service sector, hospitals, local authorities. And that's where you've seen some of the wholesalers who've bitten the bullet and moved outside of the traditional wholesale markets have had a real competitive advantage there, because they've been able to build a new unit to the correct specification. They've got controls who are visiting, and control of their own premises. So, disruptive forces within the wholesale industry. Again, some of these are actually to do with the wholesale industry. Globalisation has been mentioned several times already, and the rising competition for fresh produce from expanding and foreign markets. And even just the demand for certain products at certain times of year. Again, when, not so much now because of the sanctions, but when Russia's economy was booming, if you were unfortunate enough to be getting married on the 8th of March or around about that date, you'd suddenly find the price of your flowers tripled, which wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, but because of the rising economy in Russia as it was, it's a Russian Ladies' Day, when there's a massive demand for white flowers. It's quite hard to tell your customer that the £5 bunch of flowers that were ordered last week is now £15 or £20, but legislation, that's ever-increasing costs, probably particularly to the UK. We've recently been given the date for the introduction of the living wage, not a minimum wage as we had before, but a living wage, which is significantly higher. There's been a landfill tax escalator for several years now, which was obviously trying to reduce waste going into landfill. Compulsory employer pensions started recently, whereby all employees have to automatically be enrolled into a pension scheme when they start. They can opt out, but then you have to put them back in every year, which the administration of is a nightmare in itself. But also, employers will be required to put up to 3% of an employee's salary in. And all these are just increasing costs, and again, as we've discussed already, the prices of the produce is not going up. It's all the wholesaler can do in that situation is try and take more margin out of the existing products, which again just passes it down the line to the producer. And I think Simon talked about the cost of selling it less than the cost of production, and it's just going to get worse, unfortunately. Again, I've covered already that during the recession we've now seen the competition for what were traditional wholesale products, some of the grade 2 products and some of the smaller things. And then this is particularly relevant just to the UK, is the market relocations. So again, driven by the capital land values around major cities, it's extremely disruptive for the individual markets. I think the Birmingham market is having to move. Covent Garden market is going through the process of being redeveloped on half of the site. And the problem is you're dealing with so many tenants, or a number of tenants. They have different opinions on where they want the market to be, how they want the premises to be built. And obviously there is a requirement for wholesalers to sign up to relatively long leases to justify the new premises. And unfortunately, because of the age of a lot of wholesalers or their financial standing, they're not prepared to do that. So you often see a number of wholesalers will close if a market is forced to move. And the last one, thankfully, doesn't happen very often, but it can happen and it can be disastrous, food safety. In 2011, there was the E. coli outbreak in Europe, which was initially blamed on Spanish salad products. Could cost up to $200 million a week for the Spanish industry. And as it turns out, it was actually related back to Germany and bean sprouts. But the problem was for us, consumers moved away from salad products rapidly, and it takes a long time to get the trust back. And again, during that time, they've moved off the products, they've moved on to other things like maybe manufactured foods that they feel safer with and not taking the risk. So this is just my opinions, I'm not an expert by a long stretch, but protecting against disruption. It's a really obvious one to say, but planning, always looking ahead. A number of businesses, particularly wholesale, I think, tend to take each month as it comes. They're looking at what's happening next week, and they're not saying what's happening in 5 years or 10 years. And that's why I've personally found it essential to become involved in the wider trade, which is part of being here today at the New York Produce Show and attending the London Produce Show, part of being a director of the Fresh Produce Consortium. It's getting out and meeting peers, finding out what's happening in other areas of the world and what other companies are doing to try and address the issues. A prime example, again, Simon saying that he's put away a war chest because he knows that it's going to be bad for the next 2 years. If there were companies that haven't done that or haven't planned that far ahead, well, they probably won't be here, and Simon will be able to take advantage. Diversification, again, that's been extremely beneficial for us. With the produce side of the business and the flower side of the business, we have a very good Christmas with flowers, we have Valentine's Day in February, we have Mother's Day in March, we have a bedding plant season, April, May. But as soon as that tails off, then you have the peak months trading in the wholesale and the fruit and veg side. And again, being able to sell the florist sundries online, it all just adds other strings to our bow that we're not reliant on any one part of the business. The next one's really obvious, but again, it's to be well resourced and to be able to ride out a disruption. If you're at your overdraft limit and you hit some level of disruption, no matter what it may be, you're probably not going to survive it. We found that the way we've run the company and been able to keep money in the business has enabled us to take a lot of opportunities that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And where a lot of businesses struggle, I think, to expand is when they haven't left money in the business. And talking about the wholesale trade, I think there's a number of wholesalers who might be very profitable companies, but if they made $200,000 at the end of the year, it's, well, I'll pay myself $195,000. Great for 1 year, but not great going forward. And again, protecting against disruption, a trade association. The Fresh Produce Consortium, it does in the UK, does amazing work. A lot of it practically unknown of by the wider trade, representing us at a European level in things about MRLs. There's a whole host of issues that would have become extremely serious to the UK fresh produce trade had the Fresh Produce Consortium not been seen to it behind the scenes. So a lot of talk about disruption today in a negative sense, but it can be positive. It creates opportunities for businesses that are there and prepared. We tend to quite like disruption. And again, if I've been asked to say a few words about how to do business with the UK wholesale sector, again, I'd say don't miss out. It's a strong professional business sector. Like you saw on the video, people mentioned, we deal in top quality produce. We achieve premium prices for the best gear. And again, I would say at the London Produce Show, it's been running 2 years now. I've attended both times. The first year, I think a lot of people in the UK went to have a look, not quite sure what to expect, but were wowed by it. And the second year was even better. And although obviously it's billed as the London Produce Show, it's because of its proximity to Europe, there were an awful lot of people from Europe and further afield that had come. Of particular note were the Chinese gentleman and the Indian gentleman who came over, and when they were talking about the size of their markets, they were the most popular people the following day at the show. I think the Indian gentleman used the example 10 years ago when he was buying, he bought 4,000 cases of American apples, and within 10 years that turned into 4 million cases. And I was sat next to an American couple, and instantly his wife turned around to me and said, "Are we doing anything in India? What are we doing about India?" And then, again, if you want to do business in the UK, contact the Fresh Produce Consortium. They've got extremely good knowledge of the trade, who's operating in which sectors, and who would be good to do business with. And again, there are a number of established businesses in the UK, importers, who actually have a dedicated wholesale marketing team who have contacts in each of the markets. They'll know which companies can take which products, where you're likely to get the best money for your products, and they'd certainly be worth speaking to. It's me done, Tommy. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much for that. I just wanted to, looking at your list of disruptive forces on the wholesale market in the UK, one of the things you didn't put on there was Gilbert Thompson and what you're doing, because I've been around as a journalist for 20 years around this industry, and one of the first things I had to do was to go around all the wholesale markets for about 2 years. Spent a lot of time in all the wholesale markets across the UK, very different places to what they are now. But in that 20 years, apart from some very large companies, nobody has done what you're doing. Nobody has gone out and bought another company in another market, for instance, or in the case of Sharrock's, it used to be a wholesale market company. Yeah. Nobody's gone out and opened up a private produce centre in one city. So what you've done, I mean, do you think when you write your 13-page book, when you're 70, which is a long way away, admittedly, do you think you'll look back at yourself as being a bit of a pioneer in the 21st century wholesale trade? Or not, well, not just to make you feel embarrassed, but you and your brother. And
I was going to say, I certainly wouldn't take the credit for all that myself. We've got a team. The whole team's ambitious, whether it's the produce managing director, the flour managing director, myself and my brother. So we're constantly pushing each other, we're striving. It's competitive, you know. In a good way, we're trying to outdo each other. Someone's trying to say, my sales are up 10%, how much are yours? So, who knows? We've had a crystal ball.
Who do you feel you compete with these days? Because, going back 20, 30 years, there were, 20, 30, 40 companies in Leeds that you were competing with. You might have been competing with guys in Sheffield, guys in Gateshead. I know people haven't heard of these places, but not too far from Leeds. All sort of impinging on your trade. Not so many companies there now. So, do you think the competition and that sort of patchwork of competition has changed significantly?
I think a number of companies just tend to operate in their own area, and again, because there's a number of businesses around the country and not particularly ambitious, they're not looking to push the boundaries, they're not trying to go into new areas. And again, we do face the problem with fresh produce, wholesale fresh produce, is the margins are relatively low, and the delivery costs soon take away any benefit if you getting sales a certain distance from your base. So unless you're actually prepared to take the leap and buy a new premises, and then that's quite a risk. You've got to get the premises, you've got to recruit the staff. There's no guarantees. So people have tended to just try and dominate their local area without expanding further afield.
Yeah, the other thing that I was interested in is supply. So there was a lady from Hunts Point talking yesterday morning, in the session yesterday morning, and she's now got people out in the fields going to look for supply. And we heard Johan this morning talking about the disintermediation of the supply chain. And you said two things. One of which was that you've now got bigger purchasing power. The other was that just about all of the produce that comes into the UK wholesale markets goes through intermediaries.
Yes.
Do you see that changing at all in the next few years? Is there a wholesaler out there, including yourself, who's thinking, do you know what, I'm going to go and buy this myself, I'm going to go and find that supply?
There are some other wholesalers of a similar scale to us that are going direct and trying to start importing full containers of whatever it may be. I think that's probably a crossover. They're starting to tread on the toes of the importers once they've got to that scale. It's something we're probably trying to do ourselves, to be honest, now. Since acquiring Sharrock's, which was only in July, my brother's like a headless chicken, trying to find out new avenues of supply and things that we can start to get direct. It's the integration, isn't it? Everyone's trying to get that field to fork. And that's something the wholesale sector or the progressive wholesale companies are trying to look at to say, can they buy direct off the farmer? And even then maybe not just be a wholesaler, get into the catering side of things and deliver straight to the end user in the end.
Yeah, just one more from me before I open it up to the floor, because we're running a bit late as well. But the getting youngsters into the trade has been a perennial, argument that everyone's had. Well, how can we do this? How do we get them into the wholesale markets? Now, I was asked earlier about why should youngsters come into the fruit and veg business as a whole, which, there's some fairly obvious reasons to say, well, they should. Wholesale, to be honest, is less obvious because it's a difficult trade to work in. But have you worked out any ways yourself? How are you getting new people into the business?
It's something we just spend a lot of time discussing. It's vitally important for the business, particularly if we want to take the business forward, to have a new tier of people coming through who are going to be capable. I think someone alluded earlier to the fact that the retailers took a lot of experience out of the market and relied on someone fresh out of university, relied on intelligence rather than perhaps proven experience. So it's a balance. I think one of the things we're really having to look at, and it's is the working hours you mentioned. It's very hard work. Staff start at 1, 2:30 in the morning. It's 6 days a week. It's extremely hard to advertise a job like that and actually get people to apply. It'd be a real break for us, but we're going to have to try and look at getting people to a 5-day week, however we do that. But again, it's not popular with customers because most of our customers do a 6-day week. The independent, family-managed or owner-managed businesses, and their sort of ethos is, well, if I'm here, why aren't you here? Yeah. So it's very hard to get away from, but again, as we get bigger and hopefully try to get more professional, it's going to be necessary in order to attract that talent in.
Great, thanks.
But it's nice to see there's some, as we've got Newcastle University here,
exactly.
people coming
only
into
down
the
the road.
produce trade.
They can all come down, can't they? So any questions from the floor? Can't see who's got it. Laurie here's got the microphone. You see anybody? Can't see anybody. There we are. Did you hear that? Then?
Yeah. Actually, recently, having purchased Sharrock's, they've got a different bank to ours, and it's a Santander, and that's something they've actually come in to see us about and to try and push, because it's something Santander are running as a business to try and get interns into their customers' businesses, and that's something we have said we'd like to look at. Precisely what you say, get someone in for like 12 weeks over summer or when they're on a break, and give them some experience of the fresh produce trade, and at the same time, we can see if we like them. And we're going to give that a go. Don't know where that will lead. Again, I think, like Sam said, people are passionate about the fresh produce trade. It's the markets are an exciting place to work. People who tend to come into the business don't leave. We've got a very low staff turnover, and for all the long hours and the hard work and the harassment, it's a fun, busy, vibrant place to work.
Yeah, just on that, Jack, there's the UK government's just brought in an apprenticeship tax, which most wholesale companies will be below the threshold of companies that have to actually pay into that. But a lot of fresh produce companies will be, I was going to say hit, but affected by it. And is it 1% of turnover?
0.5% of your wage.
0.5% 0.5% of the
roll.
wage bill, that's what it is. So you would have to pay that to the government, and then you would get that back as a fund to fund apprenticeships within your company. So that's something brand new that's happening in the UK in the next couple of years, and I'm sure there'll be some wholesale companies who do that.
Well, I think
it's not going to be absolutely obligatory, is it? But
it'll affect companies with a wage bill bigger than £3 million.
Yeah, so that's not many.
So it takes out a whole tier of the lower companies, effectively. But it's still, for a lot of the bigger agribusinesses, they're going to look at that as another increased cost on top of the living wage, on top of the pension requirement, and it is driving up the cost of production.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks again to Richard. Very interesting talk. Thanks for the questions. Cheers.